aren't we?
Good morning and welcome to yet another edition of Emergency Nerds SCOTUS, because they just can't help themselves, can they, Gentab? They
I
seem
mean, there's so much. There was a bad case today, but it pales in comparison to. I mean, it's a case that goes hand in hand with the Chevron decision, and I don't want
yeah,
to get in the weeds right now because we're waiting for the main event,
yes,
and
let's not get in
we need
weeds.
a reaction shot to what the decision is in the immunity case. So we're waiting.
Yeah, we're waiting. Thanks for your patience. But as Jen alluded to, this is about much more than the immunity case. Although that is why we're here. But because things were so crazy last week, we didn't even have a chance to talk about what the Supreme Court has done and continues to do to this country. I just want to make a quick comment. For those of you who were with us last night, we talked about the debate, but mostly focused on the aftermath of the debate. And to anybody who's still talking about President Biden's performance on Thursday night, some of you, are not on the right side of things ever. And I would ask you, please, to look up a phenomenon called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And to the others of you who can't seem to let it go, but whom I know, generally speaking, operate in good faith, please look up a phenomenon called the Streisand effect. Okay. Uh, so here we are after probably the worst and most consequential Supreme Court term in American history. And I do not say that lightly. Um, we have an illegitimate supermajority, which includes some of the most, or no, sorry, the absolutely most corrupt justices this country has ever seen, who are theocratic extremists, Christian nationalists, making decisions from that perspective to overturn a woman's right to choose and to chip away at women's bodily autonomy in all sorts of ways, to render women second class citizens, to put our children at incredibly great risk, and who have decided that they know better than everybody else about science, about technology, about social media. And today we're going to find out. We're going to find out just how much further they want to destroy the tenets of American democracy, one of which is that presidents are not kings. But of course, Jen.
Oh wait, it's Roberts. Roberts.
Jesus Christ, that
Shit.
was
I'm sorry.
loud.
Sorry. I didn't realize I was so close to the mic. It's Roberts. We got it. I'm opening it.
All right,
Hold on.
buckle up.
What? I got to read this out loud. This is a syllabus, not the language from the case. Under our constitutional structure of separated powers, the nature of presidential power entitles a former president to absolute immunity from criminal prosecution for actions within his conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority, and is entitled to at least presumptive immunity from prosecution for all his official acts. There is no immunity for unofficial acts. Okay, that's not surprising. Now let's look at what they did to the case procedurally.
By the way, it's a 6-3 decision, which should give us some idea of where this is heading.
So I'm scrolling down to the very end of the syllabus, which describes it to see the action. Okay. The president enjoys no immunity for his unofficial acts, and not everything the president does is official. The president is not above the law, but under our system of separated powers, the president may not be prosecuted for exercising his core constitutional powers, and he is entitled to at least presumptive immunity from prosecution for his official acts. That immunity applies equally to all occupants of the Oval Office. And the case was vacated and remanded. I'm trying to find out, okay, this is like worse than I thought. And I'm going to go to the dissent, but I'm trying to find out the procedurally what's happening next. Let me jump to the dissent to see what the smart people said. I don't know who wrote the dissent, you guys. This is not good. It's not fatal, but the idea that you get the presumption, I mean, it's understandable, but who decides what's official and unofficial is the question. Okay, our dissent. Oh, Thomas concurs. I don't care. I'm going to scroll down to the dissent. Okay, is this my dissent? Sotomayor. I'm sorry, am I too loud, you guys? Sotomayor, Sotomayor, with whom Justice Kagan and Justice Jackson join dissenting. Reading the opening of their dissent. Today's decision to grant former presidents criminal immunity reshapes the institution of the presidency. It makes a mockery of the principle foundational to our Constitution and system of government that no man is above the law, relying on little more than its own misguided wisdom about the need for, quote, bold and unhesitating action, end quote, by the president. The court gives former President Trump all the immunity he asked for and more, because our Constitution does not shield a former president from answering for criminal and treasonous acts. I dissent. Okay, and I am. This dissent starts this dissent's about 50 pages long. I'm hoping she reads the entire thing from the bench. This is shocking. It's bad, but I don't know what the next step is, right? Because here's the only light here. We knew they were going to F this up. The case will not be tried before the election. However, Katie Fang, our friend and television commentator, had something good to say today, which she thought, now that the case is remanded back down to Judge Chutkan, she's going to have what she believes an evidentiary hearing to make a threshold determination of what is an official act and what is a non-official act. And that hearing could happen now. And that is a good thing. I mean, but if that's the case, I'm just utterly shocked.
Well, let's be clear, Jen. It's not a good thing because it never should have fucking happened. This should have been decided back in December 2023 when Jack Smith asked the Supreme Court to settle the issue of presidential immunity instead of going to the appeals court, getting an appeals court decision, and then having that go to the Supreme Court for them to take another 7 months to render a decision that is going to delay things even more. And by the way, make things even worse than that.
I need to say that to be clear. Sotomayor dissented, but Jackson appears to have her own dissent. I'm going to read her opening. Everyone wanted to fucking dissent. Let me get to how Jackson began hers. Okay. Justice Sotomayor has thoroughly addressed the court's flawed reasoning and conclusion as a matter of history, tradition, law, and logic. I agree with every word of her powerful dissent. I write separately to explain as succinctly as I can the theoretical nuts and bolts of what exactly the majority has done today to alter the paradigm of accountability for presidents of the United States. I also address what that paradigm shift means for our nation moving forward. So that's her thing. So Sotomayor's was a lot shorter than I thought. It was probably only 20 pages, and now we get to Jackson. I'm curious whether Kagan had her own dissent or not. I'm scrolling down to see. Guys, I'm just trying to read this on the fly, and I am really upset because it's far worse than I had expected. So it looks like Kagan
Can you be very specific? What is worse? Because I'm seeing people just sort of focusing on unofficial. There's no immunity for unofficial acts. There is absolute immunity, which just as it seems nobody should have absolute immunity for freaking anything. But okay,
let me explain.
So why is it worse?
Okay, here's why it's worse. Because it's not just that they created two buckets, which we knew.
Sorry, let me be more clear. Worse than what?
Worse than what we expected.
What we expect?
Okay, what we expected is the Supreme Court would say, okay, for official acts, there might be, that there wouldn't be absolute. Well, for official acts, there might be, the presumption of immunity but not absolute immunity. That's, oh, sorry, let me just back up. They said that a president could not even have to answer, that you could not even try him for official acts. And what that does is it gives unelected judges the right to dismiss cases at the outset and not necessarily, it's a legal matter as opposed to a factual matter, it looks like. And that means that a judge that likes a particular president could just say, well, that's an official act, and then the case goes away.
So in other words, our friend Asha Rangappa tweeted this. So basically, a president could order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate his political opponent, and it's okay because the court says you can't examine motive when a president is acting under an explicit constitutional authority, which would include the commander-in-chief clause.
And they do this weird thing. Yeah, it's really bad. But then they do this thing where they say it's a presumption of immunity. So I'm trying to really honestly unpack it. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to unpack, and like, I want to look at some other tweets, but I think I'm going to go over to my law professor's Larry Tribe's Twitter account because he taught me constitutional law. And I want to see what he has to say. But first, I guess I'm looking. Let me look over it. I guess Steve Vladeck has not said anything yet. Let me go to Larry Tribe.
He might be in shock. There could be that.
Yeah, let me just go to my con law professor. But I think my concern here is the devil's in the mechanical details of how this would operate. Like Asha says, right, if you can't examine motive, is that one of the cases where the lower court will just dismiss it? And it gives, I mean, does this give Biden an opportunity? I don't know. I mean, what the hell?
He wouldn't take it, so it doesn't matter because we always play by the rules.
Right.
Even,
yeah.
sorry. We try to do what's right. And obviously the rules have changed, but the rules are horrible.
Well, none of the big constitutional law thinkers that I can see are on Twitter because they're probably live on MSNBC right now. I mean, they're, in other words, everybody is obviously freaking out about this decision. And I know we can't stream that, but I'm just trying to figure out, I guess I'll try to see what the takes are if I can. I just will say I just can speak for the, especially the dissent written by KBJ, which I'm trying to go back to. Yeah.
Along those lines, I just saw a brief excerpt from Justice Sotomayor. She wrote, orders the Navy SEAL Team 6 to assassinate a political rival? Immune. Organizes a military coup to hold on to power? Immune. Takes a bribe in exchange for a pardon? Immune.
So this isn't the Sotomayor dissent. I'm going to try to search that so I can find what you're talking about on the page. Yep, I can do it on my phone. Sorry. And I'm going to write Navy SEAL.
So nerds, I'm not entirely sure how many more dark days we can withstand, but this is very bad. It's been very bad for a long time, and the Supreme Court. Oh, by the way, one of the last line of Sotomayor's defense, which should chill us all to the bone. With fear for our democracy, I dissent. Yes, indeed, Justice Sotomayor. This is where we are. I mean, if the Democratic Party and the Biden administration don't figure out a way to stop this insanity,
okay, I have the case on my computer instead of my phone. I can search it and get that part.
And again, by the way, I'm not saying this is their fault. Obviously, it's not. But they're the only entities who can do or, will want to do anything. This is Donald Trump is having yet again another great day, and that makes me insane. The Republican Party is having a great week, thanks in large part to a bunch of Democrats and alleged never Trump people. So unfortunately, as is often the case historically, it's those of us who are not responsible for the horrible mess we're in who need to clean it up. So we've got to figure something out. First and foremost, though, we need to win in November and send these people packing because
Yeah, I just yeah, I'm stunned. This thing about the official scope of authority. Is does that mean literally, like you said, like this dissents are saying, yeah, as long as as long as he is acting as commander in chief, can he take the military and do whatever he wants with it? And I'm utterly stunned. I'm just trying to find. I'm sorry. I'm trying to search
Yeah, I just
the
Kyle put some stuff in the chat. I want
yeah,
to
but
just go through
yeah,
briefly,
I'm trying to
just so we
search.
can.
Okay, I
So
got it. I got it. This is
okay,
what.
so
Yep. Go
I'll
ahead.
just going to do this quickly
Yeah.
then. How does the presidential accountability model work? So there are an initial problem is the lack of clarity regarding what the model entails. So according to the majority, and this is from, I believe, Jackson's dissent, first, with respect to any criminal conduct relating to the president's core constitutional powers, those subjects within his conclusive and preclusive constitutional authority, he's entitled to absolute immunity from criminal prosecution. So I don't know about you guys, but that's not very. I don't really know what that is.
That's
Second,
from the majority. That's the
I,
majority. Yep. Sorry.
I know that. I'm saying I don't know what it means because
Okay. Got
it's
it.
so vague, and
Yep.
who's making that decision is my point.
Yep.
Second, expanding outward from this core regarding all other acts within the outer perimeter of the president's official responsibility, the president is entitled to at least a presumptive immunity from criminal prosecution. Again, what does that mean? And who's making that decision? Third, if the criminal conduct at issue comprises unofficial acts, there is no immunity. None of this, as far as I'm aware, is defined. It is yet again an instance in which the Supreme Court seems to be taking it upon itself a redefinition of every single rule we've lived by in this country for the last half a
Yes.
century. And
So let me just back up in those three categories that you just said, because this is why it's worse, Mary. If the first one category is absolute immunity when it's in with the sphere, the problem with that is heretofore, when you were, if you were giving a pardon for a quid pro quo bribe, for example, that would have been still illegal and you would have to answer for that. Now the president can take cash to give pardons. That's one thing. The second category, the presumption of immunity when it's the outer perimeter, that's entirely new. And that's the thing that I'm concerned. And when you say who decides that, well, when you have in law, when something starts out as a presumption, then it has to be rebutted. And who has to rebut that presumption? Now, either a prosecution case or a civil lawsuit, they have to meet that burden before they even get discovery and such often. So that is now expanded immunity into the so-called outer perimeter, who decides, again, unelected judges. So this is in those two ways, this is far worse than we could have imagined. Sorry to cheer you up on this Monday.
I don't know if anybody remembers this, but when the Supreme Court decided to take the case, conventional wisdom was basically, that's horrific. It's so unnecessary. Clearly, they're just trying to delay things. But obviously, they think this is so serious. They just need to put their imprimatur upon it and make it absolutely clear that, of course, presidents don't have absolute immunity. That's ridiculous. But, we want to put our stamp on that. And we want to do our guy a favor by making sure this extraordinarily important case about whether or not he incited an insurrection against his own country and is a traitor, which of course he did and he is. We want to make sure it's not an election issue. So we're just going to give him do him
A breather.
a solid
Yeah.
and make sure the case isn't heard before the election. Everybody was saying that. Of course not. Of course not. And here we are. These people are criminals. They're traitors equal to the traitors who incited the coup. and who have been spreading the big lie and who have been undermining the American people's faith in free and fair elections. They need to be stopped, for God's sake. Something has to happen. We need to add at least 5 seats to this court to balance out the egregious criminality and partisanship and corruption that has not only taken over the court, but as we've seen in the last 2 weeks, destroyed the future of this country for generations to come, from rendering women incapable of getting the health care they need, turning them into second-class citizens, denying scientific expertise, denying us the ability to have clean air and water, and making sure that the next Republican president is a fucking emperor who is beyond any kind of restraint. It is just obscene. These people are obscene and they are untouchable right now. And that is un-American.
Mary, I want to say something that is just giving me the chills to add on to what you said.
Oh, good. We need more chills.
Well, it is 3 days before the Independence Day. 248, so almost a quarter of a millennium after we fought a war on this, not me, I wasn't here, but the people who founded this nation fought a war because they did not want to have a king. And here we are. And I want to read what Mark Joseph Stern, who is at Slate, said. He said, I just want to take a step back and say that I think the Supreme Court just fundamentally altered the structure and nature of democracy in America. It awards the president the measure of power and immunity that is much closer to a king or emperor than an actual official. And I guess, Mary, what's freaking me out is now this is the new rules of the game. And the question is, what does our president do if these are the rules of the game between now and, I don't want Biden to be a king or an emperor. So I don't want him to behave badly. But all these people who complained about executive orders during the Obama administration, all these people, the same flippin' Supreme Court who strikes down when Biden tries to get, to free people of student loans. Now they're like, well, oh no, you can't forgive student loans, but you can go ahead and kill somebody. What the fuck is going on at this Supreme Court?
Well, we know they're bought and paid for, and they have an agenda. None of this is going to touch them. What do they care? And power corrupts. Power corrupts absolutely. These people have absolute power. They have no standards. They have no principles. I'm going to take it one step further. I don't think it's even. We don't have to equivocate anymore. The Supreme Court of the United States destroyed American democracy today.
It's a coup. This was a coup.
It was a coup. Last week we saw the power grab. Today we saw the coup. And if anybody tries to, soft pedal this or downplay it, they're not being straight with you. And if this doesn't stop the nonsense about the fucking debate, I don't know what will. We need to pull together. There's just no more. There's just no more question about it. Pull together and just vote for President Biden and Vice President Harris. I mean, that is right now the most patriotic thing we can do. I don't even like using that word. It makes
and we need a majority
in
in the Congress so that we can rebalance the court.
There's another quote from Justice Jackson. And by the way, not just patriotic. If you want to save your country and save your future and your children's futures, you have to vote for the Democrats, no matter what.
Why don't we just live in a country with a king? I mean, this is ridiculous.
Well, if you want to go live in a country with a king, Saudi Arabia is a lovely place, and I'm sure you will be very happy there. Okay, so from not you, the people who think that this is a good thing. Okay, from Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. If the structural consequences of today's paradigm shift mark a step in the wrong direction, then the practical consequences are a 5-alarm fire. Okay. Then the practical consequences are a 5-alarm fire that threatens to consume democratic self-governance, and the normal operations of our government. Now, unquote. Now, what I find just shocking is that the majority knows all of this. It's not like they're pretending that they're confused and they think that they're preserving something. They know exactly what they're doing. I mean, I'm sure that I don't know if their actual reasoning is in the decision. I'm guessing the decision will be full of sleights of hand. But I would really like to know what they said in close quarters, because they, we keep hearing that the Biden team owes us an explanation for Thursday night, and I don't disagree. I'd like to know if it, was it cold medicine, okay? Because then that'll stop that conversation. We deserve an explanation of how this decision was arrived at. I don't believe it's in the decision, because these are liars. And okay, so Kyle's sense is that the court's the majority is mostly concerned that without immunity, presidents might be chilled from taking the bold and unhesitating action required of an independent executive. By the way, never in human history, American history, which is not as nearly as long as human history, never in American history has this been an issue before. Never, ever, ever. It's just for Donald Trump. Just like they made a carve out for George Bush and Bush v. Gore, they're making a carve out for the most criminal, vicious, cruel, mendacious loser in this country's history, for God's sake. So aside from inciting an insurrection against his own government, stealing highly classified government documents after he was no longer in office. What, does he get immunity for that too, because he was in the Oval Office once? I mean, seriously, is that what we're talking about? Okay, so nobody is saying that anything he did before that is up for grabs. Even his most despicable, horrific decisions, like kidnapping children and putting them in concentration camps, he's not getting punished for that. He's not getting punished for killing hundreds of thousands of Americans with COVID. He's not even getting punished for spreading the big lie and undermining people's faith in our free and fair elections. None of that. Those were all official acts. They were bad official acts. They were criminal official acts. He's not being prosecuted for anything. He's being prosecuted for the things he did to attack this country. We've never had to deal with this situation before, because nobody has ever been a criminal to this degree before. If that's really what they were worried about, then we would have seen a prosecution of George Bush for Iraq, for the torture memo. We would have seen a prosecution of what's his name? We would have not everyone, but almost every single president would have been prosecuted for some criminal act during their administration for doing something that was clearly wrong, if not criminal. We never saw it before, because no president committed the kinds of extra governmental, extra executive crimes that Donald Trump committed. Okay, so
can I just say a couple things, because just to give people some of the context. So there is a primary dissent that all three of the good justices signed on to, right? That Sotomayor wrote. Sotomayor, Kagan, and KBJ joined that. KBJ just had a separate when she wanted to highlight the nuts and bolts. I want to read to you from part of the main dissent. And this is what is, I just took a look at what folks are discussing. I read part of this, but this is the part I did not read. And some people have just joined us. So let me just give you this because I see the numbers going up and I want people to be able to hear this. Okay. This is the beginning of the dissent. Today's decision to grant former presidents criminal immunity reshapes the institution of the presidency. It makes a mockery of the principle foundational to our Constitution and system of government that no man is above the law, relying on little more than its own misguided wisdom about the need for bold and unhesitating action by the president. The court gives former President Donald Trump all the immunity he asked for and more, because our Constitution does not shield a former president from answering for criminal and treasonous acts. I dissent. Now, here's this key piece. The indictment paints a stark portrait of a president desperate to stay in power. So she, in this majority, begins the story of what this, step by step, what his attempted coup was about. And then they say this is the backdrop against which this case comes to the court. And a couple more things. The court now confronts a question it has never had to answer in the nation's history: whether a former president enjoys immunity from federal criminal prosecution. The majority thinks he should. And so it invents, you heard that, it invents an atextual, ahistorical, and unjustifiable immunity that puts the president above the law. So these guys who pretend they're textualists, that pretend they care about history, they pretend they care about reason, it is a facade. There couldn't be anything more important to our democracy than the separation of powers. And they pretend that they're relying on that, and they are granting Donald Trump and all presidents the status of emperor or king. I did not think this was going to be the decision, because as we talked about before, I didn't expect the three buckets to lay out the way that they did.
Yeah. Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, my question is, having just read it, and I'm not the constitutional scholar, what the hell? What's to keep Joe Biden from exercising this immunity and dissolving the Supreme Court?
Well, let's put Kyle, if you could put that screen.
He can't do that because that's not within Article 2.
Hang on a sec. Let's just check this out. Our friend and fellow Nerd Avenger, Adam Parker Mako, tweeted this. The Supreme Court just ruled that Joe Biden can do whatever the fuck he wants, including be the Democratic nominee. Yes, indeed. But in all seriousness, though, I think the campaign needs to completely just ignore all of the noise and figure out, and I'm saying this in all seriousness, figure out how to leverage this before the election. I mean, I'm in shock right now. Like, I cannot wrap my head around. And I've been trying to wrap my head around this stuff since 2015. Well, maybe since 1965. Who knows? It's been a very long time. That the worst, literally the worst person who has ever walked the planet, is getting favor after favor. People in positions of immense power are bending over backwards for him at every opportunity. The Democrats need to figure something out. They need to figure it out quickly, because this cannot stand. It is absolutely untenable for the future of this country. And if any Supreme Court justice can point to the place in the Constitution where it says that presidents are above the law, the Constitution doesn't apply to them, they can be emperors, please do so, because I am not understanding how any sane, reasonable, logical person who allegedly has read the Constitution can come to this fucking conclusion. As Jen said earlier, we fought a war about this. Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, so I'm going to just jump in before Brian speaks, because for those who are like scouring this, here's something really important. Steve Laddick, law professor joining George Washington University this fall, said that there's an important subpart of this ruling where the Supreme Court holds that protected conduct, that the stuff that can't be prosecuted, also can't be used as evidence to establish other charges. And this is something that Justice Barrett agrees with the dissenters that it's wrong. So let me just explain that in plain English. Steve said this is a big part of why the ruling is a bigger win for Trump than many of us had been expecting. It is not just which acts will be immune, it's how this will hamstring efforts to prosecute even those acts for which there isn't immunity. Sorry to cheer you all up.
I mean,
but this detail is, what people are going to be, this is a long decision. People are going to be scouring it, not just today and tomorrow, but, for a century.
If we last that long.
Yeah. Well, my question is, all right, so I'm reading what Kyle put up about, in sum, the majority today endorses an expansive vision of presidential immunity that was never recognized by the founders, any sitting president, the executive branch, or even President Trump's lawyers until now. Its settled understandings of the Constitution are of little use to the majority in this case, so it ignores them. So my question and I guess it's for constitutional scholars, and I see Sotomayor wrote the dissent, is in applying this, how does the current sitting president take advantage of this?
That's the question, and I don't know, because
what happened to institute? Here's the bigger question: what about institutional norms? What about when they said that they were going to that cases that had been ruled upon and had been settled, they would not overturn? They just overturned the Constitution.
They lied.
Yes.
They lied.
When I went to law school,
it's okay to lie. No, so it's okay to lie, and you can remain in office or even run for president, but it's not okay to stumble and make a mistake, and you should sit down. Basically, this is the upside down. We've entered the bizarro world of our politics. The only way to cure it is through congressional action, and we're not going to see that. And this particular piece, if this stands as it is, and I guess it will because it's Supreme Court, you're going to have like a constitutional convention. Can you imagine the next time that this type of issue would come before the Supreme Court? Oh, by the way, it looks to me like if you wanted to take an official act as president, I'm sorry, under Section 2, but as I'm reading it now, Article 2, Jen, I mean, an actual act, I could say, you know what? I don't want you in as the Supreme Court.
Well, hold on.
Got to do something, man.
Let me just say something, though. There's a couple, one reflective thing and one practical thing. I'll do the practical thing first. And I know this having had a conversation with Steve Vladeck when his book about shadow docket came out. So Congress, of course, makes the rules around the Supreme Court. This is they did one of the first laws they passed was the Judiciary Act, and Congress could say, "Fuck you! You're not going to be in the nice building," and they could put them back in a fucking basement where they started. There's a lot you can do to diminish their prestige, which is important. To take away their budget, make them smaller. Second idea, they gave themselves the power of judicial review, and this is where Brian's right. A president can say, I don't think you have the final say. You had a ruling on Chevron. I'm going to make an executive order. I mean, there's a lot that can be done. I think the lawyers around the president need to figure this out. Now, the other thing I want to say is I was never one of these people who had tremendous reverence for the Supreme Court. When I was in law school, I was a scholar who, I'm not saying I didn't have respect,
well,
but
Scott and Plessy v. Ferguson.
But I was a scholar. I was part of the critical legal studies folks and legal realists. What Oliver Wendell Holmes said. What the courts will do is what I mean by law, and that's why I felt comfort in being a business and corporate lawyer, because as a constitutional lawyer, you were supposed to try to be consistent and make consistent arguments. And I was like, you have a client, you make the argument that works, and that made sense for me. And so even me, who has utter cynicism about this court, is shocked to my core, because I want to say, everyone said, what's the worst thing that could happen if Donald Trump is elected? Overturning Roe versus Wade and creating a king. My friends, the institutions did not hold. Fuck you, but her email people.
Yeah, no kidding.
No pun intended.
And honestly, I have to say, and people may take issue of this because of the aforementioned decisions, Dred Scott, Plessy v. Ferguson, et cetera, so many horrific decisions. However, the Taney court and the courts during Reconstruction that made those egregious decisions were actually in step with the majority of the American people. I'm sorry to say, this court is completely out of step with the American people. We've seen this in the vast majority of decisions this term and in the last, since the illegitimate supermajority took over and decided, hey, we got all the power now. Just try to stop us, and nobody can. And somebody's got to. But Allie, I can't feel my face right now, so I'm just curious, how are you absorbing this to the extent that it's even possible?
I'm horrified. I feel like the initial reaction from people was like, okay, we'll be okay, we're fine. And I'm sitting here horrified. I'm like, this is terrifying because we don't know exactly what constitutes an official act or not.
Right, Allie, that's such a good point, because I feel like when I was looking at responses on Twitter, people were just like desperately clinging to the part of the decision that said presidents are not immune for unofficial acts. But that was before, as you said, we realized we don't know what anything means anymore.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, we have no idea. And now it's going back to a lower court, which is again delaying the trial and the justice that we actually deserve as Americans, which is so frustrating. Like, oh my gosh, it feels like we're helpless and we cannot do anything to, like, the Supreme Court is using this as a political tool. And it's terrifying to think about what a Donald Trump presidency with absolute immunity over official acts could look like. I mean, it could mean that people can't protest without the threat of being bombed or shot down. And we already know that he wanted to do these things during the BLM protests and other things and other ideas that he came up with that his advisors have told us about, like shooting migrants and stuff. Like, it's just terrifying. So
throwing reporters out of the press corps. He tried that with me and Jim and a few others. He'll be successful this time because it's an official act and I would have no recourse. No judicial recourse.
Well, that's going to be that's going to be the other thing. We're going to start to figure out, like, does this, if you'll excuse the use of the word, does this trump like First Amendment rights? Does this Trump 14th? I mean, I don't think there's any bottom here. I just wanted to, before we continue, read a couple of other quotes that kind of helps put this in, sort of broaden the context. Or deepen it, as the case may be. Okay, so first, the majority relies almost entirely on its view of the danger of intrusion on the executive branch to the exclusion of the other side of the balancing test. Its analysis rests on a questionable conception of the president as incapable of navigating the difficult decisions his job requires while staying in the bounds of the law. It also ignores the fact that he receives robust legal advice on the lawfulness of his actions. Exactly. It's not, again, I've been saying this in the context of that other issue that we've been talking about. One person does not run the frigging government. One person has a massive team at his disposal to do that. So it's absurd that one person needs absolute immunity for anything. Okay, further, the majority seems to think that allowing for American presidents to escape accountability for breaking the law while disabling the current executive from prosecuting. Oh, this is really important. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to start again because I realized mid-sentence just how important this is. The majority seems to think that allowing for American presidents to escape accountability for breaking the law while disabling the current executive from prosecuting such violations somehow respects the independence of the executive. Yes, which one? The current one or the former one? It does not. Rather, it diminishes that independence, exalting occupants of the office over the office itself. There is a twisted irony in saying, as the majority does, that the person charged with, quote, taking care that the laws be faithfully executed, unquote, can break them.
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say help me, but there is no help here at all.
Let's get all of the crap and bad news out right now. I thought I saw something.
Stop it.
I thought I saw something, and I did, and it wasn't just in my nightmares. I saw this in the majority decision.
My nightmares have absolutely nothing on reality right now.
Yeah, my nightmares used to be like showing up in my pajamas for a Broadway musical, and I have a lead role and don't know the words. Okay, and I am tone deaf. But this particular living nightmare, in the majority decision, I'm reading a quote from Kavanaugh. That immunity, meaning everything we've been talking about, the absolute immunity for official acts, etc., applies equally to all occupants of the Oval Office, regardless of politics, policy, or party. What is an occupant, by the way?
What does that mean?
What's an occupant of the Oval Office?
Also, I call bullshit.
No, but wait a second. You could just wait. I'm not going to
Well,
fuck
I guess
with
the
you.
dog gets,
Wait.
I guess the dog gets immunity.
No. Yeah, and this isn't a joke about Major the dog. I'm actually being serious as a lawyer, because just hold with me. You could designate anyone as an occupant of the Oval Office. You are now giving immunity to a flippin' hit squad, etc.
Yeah.
Okay,
That was my point as a joke, but you're right.
That's
exactly right.
This is what we have to work with. Okay, so if they're saying it applies equally to all occupants of the Oval Office, regardless of politics, policy, or party, one, I don't believe them. But two, that applies to President Biden's team right now. Okay, so we know that President Biden, no, unless he's actually standing in the. I mean, maybe I guess if he's.
I don't think getting a gun was an official act, but okay.
No, but no, we're talking about going forward. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that it's only going to be retroactive for Donald. And by the way, even if it were retroactive, in what way does it apply to the Biden administration? It doesn't, because they haven't incited coups and, stolen classified government documents. So it's that we're just talking about going forward. So what can the Biden administration do to make use of this? I'm not at all suggesting they break the law in the way that Donald Trump did. But as Jen said earlier, like, what are things that cross that challenge this in a way that helps Americans? Is it just putting 5 new justices on the Supreme Court? I don't know. I mean, I don't. It's so vague, and it's also like, wait, does it really only apply to things the Biden administration wouldn't do, like murder a political opponent using SEAL Team 6? Like, that's what's kind of like. It's making it impossible to fix this with anything that wouldn't challenge. I see. It's rendering me incoherent because it's so bad. I mean, Allie, do you see what I'm getting at? Like, what can the Biden, and I know there's no answer to this right now, and hopefully they're working on it though. Like, what can the Biden administration do to use this somehow to undermine, not undermine it, but kind of use it to give the Biden administration an advantage going into the election, for example, or, to protect the rest of us from the insanity.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if this even falls under this new ruling, but someone just tweeted Biden should just issue an executive order saying felons can't run for the presidency. And I was like, that is genius.
I love that.
Or maybe just postpone the 2024 election. It's an official act.
Yeah, I like the first one better.
I do too.
Yeah, I'm like, that's actually not a bad idea. Because I feel like, I don't know, there's no holds barred at this point. Like, there's just the Biden administration is more morally like intact than the Trump administration ever was.
Right.
So of course
we're always Lodge's idea. Kneecap them. You don't have to get down in the gutter with them, but you can certainly kneecap them standing up top. So.
But that does seem to be the problem. This gives the huge advantage to the side that is completely willing,
of course,
to break the law and commit violence and all that other stuff. And it hog ties. I've never used that phrase in my life. It ties our hands, whatever, you know what I'm saying. It makes it impossible. I know. Jen's like, just shut up.
Don't even keep referring to it. I don't need the visual.
You're in. So basically, it ties our hands because we're not willing to do those things. That does not, however, mean that we shouldn't get down the mud and fight with everything we've got within the bounds, because Jesus, this is I mean, if yesterday we would have said everything is at stake, and now that's true in a way I don't think any of us could possibly have imagined, because I knew this was going to be bad. I didn't realize it was possible for it to be this bad.
So one thing I want to say is all of the feelings we're having, they're good, they're right. And in terms of next steps, I think I fully agree. We have to win. But I also think that we need to very carefully point to the people and not trust them as advisors who, back when Joe Biden had that commission, they said, should we add more seats to the court? And, Joe Biden and his team was like, we're going to, no, because that looks bad. And then the other side will do it. They're going to do it anyway. At some point, we have to fight for a democracy and have a spine. And in terms of, what makes sense going forward that Biden could do to help the country now, part of the problem is the difference between holding him personally accountable and stopping something he officially tries to do. For example, even if Biden couldn't be held personally accountable, the Supreme Court and others can still stop him from, forgiving people student loans. So I think we need to think, it feels like, well, oh my God, this is terrible. How can we take advantage of it? But it's going to be a little more nuanced. But I do hope over the next week or so, we think very carefully about what's at stake. And Mary, I mean, all of us knew this before, and everyone who said the institutions held, the minute we lost Roe v. Wade, they didn't hold.
No,
and I'm
you're
just
right.
curious, Allie, from a perspective of someone from a younger generation who is, who's aware of people who this isn't like top of mind, how would you discuss this with people who don't fully pay attention to this kind of thing?
To discuss the immunity ruling. I mean, I feel like it's pretty simple to understand. It's one of those issues that it's like, hold on, that doesn't sound right. A president can do essentially whatever they want without any accountability. So, I mean, it's as simple as that. And I also think it's something it's digestible, like I just said, and it's pervasive. Like, it's going to affect everybody in some way. So I'll be talking about it with my circle. I'll be talking about it with my friends and spreading it among my, audience as much as I can, because I think this is something that could potentially, I mean, Biden should be talking about it until the election. And it makes it even more dire considering the fact that Donald Trump is a convicted felon who is running, and now we'll have these new capabilities if he's elected again. So I think we should not stop talking about it, and I'm not going to stop talking about it.
Yeah, I think this is the new most important issue. And Brian, like, what I've been saying this since, well, I don't know, forever, I guess.
Well,
hang on. I actually have a question though. I want to get your take on this, because one of the most dangerous things that's happened since the 2016 election, including what happened during the 2016 election, is this sense that this thing happens and we're told, well, that's just the way it is. You need to accept it, right? And then we get situations like the impeachment. Donald gets impeached because he actually committed the crimes of which he was accused. And then we can't get enough votes in the Senate to convict him because the Republican Party is deeply corrupt to its core. And what then happens is the American people hear, oh, he didn't get convicted, so I guess what he did was okay. So the line gets moved, the goalposts get moved, and it all gets normalized. Like, how bad? And this is why, in my view, Merrick Garland will go down as one of the worst, if not the worst, attorneys general in American history, because by waiting so long, the message to the American people was, well, I guess it's not that bad. I mean, if it were as bad as we were told, we're now being told, they would have done something sooner, right? So I guess, and then we have the whole Republican Party saying, January 6th was fine. So it sends this
Whitewashing
message
it.
to the
Yeah.
totally whitewashing it, totally normalizing criminality and treason. So, here we are. Well, hey, if the Supreme Court is saying it, I mean, they know everything and they have all the power, so it must be okay. Like, that's what concerns me, Brian, which is why we cannot shut up about this ever.
No, I think there's a great line that was attributed to Winston Churchill when his generals and his and others of the government came to him and said, "Look, we can appease, we can settle with Hitler." He says, "No, I know who he is. He will not stop. You cannot settle with him. You cannot allow him to do that." And I know we often compare Donald Trump to Hitler, but this is an actual event that has just occurred that you have to say no. You cannot stop saying no. You must push back. If we are to have a democracy, or as Thomas Jefferson said, are we going to have a democracy? Well, if we choose to. That's it. At the bottom line, you have to choose.
If we can keep it.
If we can keep it.
Well, at first it was if we choose to, and if we can keep it was what came afterwards. I mean, before they passed the Declaration.
Oh, good point.
And then if we choose to, and then can we keep it? Well, yeah, we're at that point now. I feel like you look at the okay, I'm getting frustrated, but look, when you look at I'm with you. When you look at what the founding fathers tried to put together, and it was a living, breathing document. It wasn't perfect, but it made one fatal flaw. It assumed that the people of the United States would be educated enough to make a decision. And we have destroyed education. And look, No Child Left Behind became Every Child Left Behind. And that generation of education, and the generation that I'm from of education, didn't exist. We don't have civics anymore. We don't know what's going on in the United States. If you want to be involved and be a critical thinker, you are in the minority. And that to me is, Mary, I'm always hopeful. I'm hopeful that sometime today that there will be an executive decision. I'm going to go with Allie on that one. I like the tweet. I'm hoping there's an executive decision that bans convicted felons from running for office. And in his official capacity, I would like to see an executive decision which removes the people of the Supreme Court from the Supreme Court, or revokes the decision that was made today. You gave them it's an official act.
At least Thomas and Alito, because horrific decisions aside,
ethical transgressions,
they're corrupt. Exactly. Yeah. They are ethically unfit to be on this court. And like, nobody can argue with that. Nobody. So I don't know. As somebody said, there will, like, every lawyer in America is going to be looking at this, particularly the lawyers on the Biden team. Mm-hmm. I think it's necessary, Jen, for the Biden administration to do something that will trigger a lawsuit and see what happens.
Yeah, what does that matter if you've got it stacked against you?
No, like, because it's going to make it, and I don't mean like, do something just for the sake of getting a lawsuit. I mean, do something, anything he does, right? Anything he does to take advantage of this in a good way will trigger a lawsuit. You know that, right? So it's a way to have in real time for the American people to see how things play out in the context of this absolute absurdity. I mean, does anybody have other ideas? Right now, my favorite one is an executive order saying convicted felons cannot run for the presidency, which should be, look, I mean, there are so many things. It could be convicted felons. It could be people who cannot get a security clearance. That would also apply to Donald Trump. Even before the convictions, he could not get a security clearance, right? The idea that the most powerful job in the world can go to somebody who could not get another job anywhere else, it's just,
my son works at Target, and you cannot get a job at Target if you're a convicted felon. So, but you could run the United States of America if you're a convicted felon. pretty
So
damn.
not to be, you know, Pollyanna with all of my happy talk here, but if I were
Happy talk? How dare you?
if I were on the, you know, so you know, the trouble with this case is it has so many Easter eggs for Donald Trump. And I expect it becomes not just a talking point on the campaign, but a legal strategy that he is going to try to argue that the 34 felony counts he was convicted for are unconstitutional. And he's going to, of course, already appealing it on that ground. He did make that motion at the last minute, and Judge Merchan said no, ruled against him. So that's going to be grounds for appeal. Now, whether that works or not doesn't really matter because now he can hold on to this case. I'm also worried about the judgment against him in the E. Jean Carroll case because the majority talks about what is official speech and what isn't. And of course, this was already litigated and he won't win, but it will tie this up. It's already on appeal. It's just going to tie things up. And again, he would have already made these arguments, but the problem is they become campaign talking points. I expect that all the Trump surrogates are going to be saying this is a across the board victory. All this shit against him is going to be wiped out. And it's a lie. And I just hope here's my positive note in all this. Over in Europe, in France, the left and center left are going to ally against the right wing party. The far right party, they know that they're going to back who they need to. So Marine Le Pen the fascist does not take over. And so what I would say is the Democratic Party, independents, and any lovers of freedom need to do whatever it takes, whatever choreography is involved to back Joe Biden, the Democratic candidate. And for whatever reason, which I doubt, if it becomes Kamala Harris and not Joe, back her. Everything rides on stopping Donald Trump from doing more damage when he is in office because he has just given carte blanche by the U.S. Supreme Court.
So, Allie, Jen just made a good point about optics, because those are, as we learned, much to our chagrin on Friday, more important than anything else. So, not only do we need people to see what this means in real world and its real world implications, people who are still, just talking about Thursday night need to look at Fox News and see what they're doing with that New York Times op-ed. Editorial. This is not a joke anymore. So like, what's the message for people who aren't on board all the way, to the extent that that's even a thing that's possible because of one, subpar debate performance?
I mean, like, I keep saying the same thing over and over, but like, what Joe Biden does is his decision alone. And like, I'm going to ride with him and support him until the end. And that's what we all need to do if we're serious about preventing Donald Trump from being elected again. And I think this is just another thing that shows us how terrifying another presidency would be among Project 2025 and others. So, I mean, I find people that are just tweeting Twitter fingers, whatever that comes to their mind about how their opinions on Joe Biden can just keep their mouth closed, and because it's not helpful. It's really not helpful at all. And your opinion isn't going to sway him and his decision one way or the other. So it's like, I am going to back him, support him, 100%, because I know that he's the only thing stopping a unchecked tyrant from coming back into office.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Brian, when people are in these echo chambers and silos, they seem to think they have some outsized influence, but what happens is they're just convincing people in their circle, and that's and that spreads.
Yeah,
Not to the people they're trying,
Exactly.
they're trying to influence. Like, as
You're
Allie
just
said,
playing
like,
into the hands
nothing any of us
MAGA camp.
says we're not influencing President Biden. It's absurd.
Well,
he has
I've covered that
advisors.
I've covered that administration for the last 3.5 years. One thing I will say about Joe Biden that I could never say about Donald Trump is that Joe Biden is his own man. Joe Biden will make a decision. Joe Biden is a man. Donald Trump
there's
would
that.
never even, Donald Trump would sit in there and scream and rant and rave like a whining little ninny, and the last person that talked to him was the one that had influence over him. That's
Exactly.
there's the difference between the two right there. And so, as far as who you back, look, at this point in time, the point has to be made continuously, and today's decision by the Supreme Court proves it more than anything else, is that it isn't a battle between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. It's a battle between democracy and authoritarianism. And these two people represent the differences in government that we have to vote for. And if you are not cognizant of that, you're the mark, and you're the one that's going to be, we're all going to suffer. But staying inside your own little information silo and loving the ping pong effect of listening to people like-minded say what you want to say is not effective in government. In fact, it's destructive of government, and it leads to the people that we have on the Supreme Court today, and it leads to what we have in the Republican Party. For the love of God, just think about it. And this is what, I really frustrates me the most, is that we see time and time and time and time and time again Donald Trump violating the norms of our democracy, right? Joe Biden has one moment on stage where he's not there, and you're calling for his ousting. All right, if you're going to apply that criteria to the current president, apply the same criteria to Donald Trump. Because if you take, all right, just ignore everything that's gone on in the past and talk about what happened in that debate. On that, you want to get rid of Joe Biden? Well, listen to what Donald Trump said and ask him to sit his big, fat, flaccid ass down, because he denied history, once again kissed Putin's ass during the middle of it, denied everything that has occurred, burns everything down, says we're all great. We're great when I'm here. Otherwise, we're a third world nation. I'm tired of hearing that crap. If you've got if it takes real courage, the only one that had the courage to call it on that was the Philadelphia Inquirer. And for the love of God, the people of the New York Times and Atlanta Journal ought to sit their butts down and read a history book, because this is
and many others, sadly. So, but Jen, I know you want to say something. I just really quickly want to reiterate that there are two things we should be talking about between now and the election incessantly. Sorry, guys, you're going to get so sick of us, but hey, it's all because we're on the right side of things. This Supreme Court decision and Project 2025, which is a fascist playbook that is endorsed by the entirety of the Republican Party. And I'm not kidding. We will talk about that in great detail between now and the election. Anyway, Jen, go ahead.
Yeah. So again, because I'm talking here and not reading, I'm relying on other experts.